in the field.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first of our three-part Creative Circle Series panel. Madison Park Development is celebrating its 55th anniversary this year. And what best way to celebrate than to honor Hibernian Hall and some of the amazing creative individuals who have made an impact and who continue to make an impact in lots of fields of such as social justice, the arts, and community in general. So our guests tonight are Ms. Kelley Chunn and Ms. Valerie Foxx. Kelley Chunn is the principal of Kelley Chunn and Associates, an award-winning 29-year-old state-certified collaborative PR and marketing consultancy based in Boston's Roxbury neighborhood. Kelley Chunn and Associates provides culturally smart strategies to promote social change with a focus on equity, inclusion, civic engagement, and community outreach. Her journey has taken her from Boston to New York, to Nigeria, and the White House. And next is Ms. Valerie Foxx. Valerie Link Foxx is the CEO of Butterfly Fox Productions, Amazon #1 best-selling author of 3 books, Love Lives On, Life Before and After Death Came Knocking, the unfinished book, A Glimpse into My Mother's Incredible Life's Journey, co-author, and her recently published book, Our Love Story, Our Life's Journey. Actress, poet, author, entrepreneur, and motivational speaker with over 30 years of experience. Welcome, ladies. And before we dive in, I just want to let our audience know that we will probably reserve the last 10 minutes or so of our panel tonight and open it up to questions, comments, any fun stories anybody wants to share in the chat. So, feel free. So, hello. Okay, how are you guys doing tonight?
We're good. I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Thank
Valerie,
you.
hi.
Hi.
You. So I have to say, when I told some of my peers that I would be talking to you guys tonight, people gave me some great responses and they were very curious to hear what you have to say. Why do you think that is?
Well, Hibernian Hall has a lot of history. It's been a community gathering and convening space. There's been a lot of joy and celebration in the space. And so I can understand why you got that reaction.
Yes, and I think that because we have such a rich history and cultural, events that constantly take place in such a historic area of Roxbury, that people are not aware of all the things that actually take place here and all of the things that Hibernian Hall and Madison Park Community Development Corporation is doing, which extends far beyond the Roxbury community.
So with that in mind, tell me a little bit about how you guys have been affiliated with Hibernian Hall, how long, and just a little bit about your story.
Well, I was one of the first tenants when Hibernian Hall reopened. It had a whole nother life as an opportunities industrialization center, I guess during, many decades ago. And then it was an Irish dance hall, as a lot of people know. But my story really started with the rehab, the glorious rehab. I think it was about 2005 when the building reopened, and I really wanted to be part of the mix. So I had an office in the building.
And I remember OIC because that was a place where, as a teenager, I used to go to stay informed about opportunities and things happening in the community for jobs and recruitment, along with other like the Action for Boston Community Development, ABCD, and all those things. And I contribute those to really saving me from just hanging out in places I had no business being, because there was a place where we could go as young teens and find out what's going on. And my history is I've been a Roxbury resident for almost 50 years now. It started when my parents moved here in the early 70s. And I'm still a resident and homeowner right now. I've taken advantage of different opportunities in the Roxbury area. I'm very proud of my community. I became involved with Hibernian Hall. First, I was joined up for the membership and just made donations. And then I started attending different events there. And now I'm proud to say that I am one of the advisory committee members. So I'm really glad that it's taken me on this journey. And this is where I am, and I'll continue to support all of the people that are involved with the committee and as many events that they do as I can.
I love it. And Kelley, you said something. You said that Hibernian Hall reopened in 2005. Can you tell me a little bit about that? I actually didn't know that. That's very
well. Madison Park bought the building, the Madison Park Development Corporation, and actually, you know, they've been a client over the years as part of my PR and marketing business, and they did the rehab. You know, they did a significant rehab on the building, and of course, Hibernian Hall, because it's the community space, so the entire building is beautiful. But the ballroom, where a lot of the cultural activities happen, is really kind of the heart of the building. So as I established my office, I started working on a jazz cafe in Hibernian Hall. We were talking about Fulani Haynes before we went on, and we had community-based artists come in as part of the Jazz Cafe. I think we might have been a little bit ahead of our time, but we had a series of local artists come in and perform, and you know, we invited the community to come in, and we had a kitchen that provided refreshments and so forth. So it's a kind of a long history with the building. I remember actually the opening celebration. Tito Jackson, people may remember, he was a city councilor at the time. You know, he's since you know, gone on to other things, but he was part of the welcome along with other public officials. I mean, I think the ballroom was at capacity. You know, people were so excited, you know, when the building opened, and I wanted having a whole nother life in TV news and production. I wanted a bird's eye view. So I went up. People who are familiar with the auditorium or the ballroom know that there's a control room, there's a studio where you can kind of see the whole space. So I went up there because I really wanted to get the full experience. So there have been some really fun and exciting times over the years.
And speaking of fun and exciting times, I guess I'm really curious, what was the first event or a very memorable event that you guys remember from Hibernian Hall that you attended?
Well, I remember attending, like one of the things that stand out in my mind is when some plays that Jackie Parker has put on there at Hibernian Hall, also coming out just to support local artists and walk around with the different vendors. We had a huge event there. What I like about it is different organizations would come and do events, and then you could walk around and actually network. One of the ones that I remember is the Dudley Square Main Streets, or now Roxbury Main Streets events, where we would do the business luncheons, and you'd have all different speakers come out to these events, and Sparks for the Arts, and some of the online dance type series and stuff that they had there. So there's so many things that I think about when I think about Hibernian Hall and the events they've had there.
And what about you, Kelley?
Just trying to get off mute. The anniversary celebrations, you know, Madison Park has had some fabulous community-based anniversary celebrations over the past few years, where residents of Roxbury who do, you know, young people who do spoken word. Valerie talked about plays, where they've done plays, and they've had music, and they've almost been like reunions. You know, people who are from the neighborhood come and you know, just have a good time. Of course, this is all pre-COVID, but the anniversary celebration sparked the arts, where Hibernian Hall has recognized community-based artists and kind of lifted them up every year. Those have, and also had fundraisers to support the arts in the building. they've all been very memorable.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I got to direct at Hibernian Hall for a festival called Six Playwrights in Search of a Stage. That was my first experience in the space. And besides everybody knowing the space and being there and knowing stories and just kind of everybody knowing each other, I thought the space itself also is very easy to transform into whatever the world of your production is, and I love that about Hibernian Hall. So Valerie,
I'm sorry, I should probably do this in the chat, but there are some people like Fulani who are having trouble getting into the Zoom. The link, apparently there's a mix up with the link, so maybe Ola can help.
Yes, we definitely want Fulani, because I'm pretty sure she's gonna contribute with her stories at the end.
For sure. But I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Oh no problem at all. I actually wanted to just continue on the path of talking about plays. And Valerie, I wanted to mention I got a chance to watch on YouTube your portrayal of Phyllis Wheatley at Hibernian Hall. And for those of you who might not know, Phyllis Wheatley, Valerie put on a one-woman show, and she portrayed Phyllis Wheatley, and that's a story. It's a true story of a young woman who was kidnapped from Africa and sold into slavery, and then she eventually became the first African-American author of a poetry book. So Valerie put on an amazing performance of her story. And by the way, we can share the link on YouTube if you guys would like to watch it, because it's really great. And Valerie, tell me a little bit about your process, and why did you pick Hibernian Hall as the place to bring her story to life?
Well, because my process was, my first introduction to Phyllis Wheatley was, of course, in school. And that is one of the different characters that I like to play historical characters. And even though this was based on a true story, I was amazed at the number of people that did not know the true story of Phyllis Wheatley. Now, they've heard of her and things like that, but they didn't know her true history. So I started initially with just like reading her poetry. And then I got involved with a group from South Boston, and they were doing reenactments with other historical characters. And I started going to the various schools from in the Boston public school system, and we would travel around and do these events. And so the more I told the story, I realized how important it was to make her history come alive. So it was a living history type of a setup. And in preparation for that, the schools would have the children read about Phyllis Wheatley, and then they would then in turn ask questions. And so I enjoyed getting into the character, telling her story, and continuing to share our history, which is so important for people to know, what happened and how we come around from that. I do it at different libraries in the Boston area. And now I have my grandchildren and great nieces and stuff that are aware of the story. And I continue to portray different characters. And in fact, I just add one thing is that in February, in honor of Black History Month, I did a Remembering Cicely Tyson, because one of the other characters that I portray is I took scenes adapted from the television version of Miss Jane Pittman, and actually did my own reenactment of that based on 2 scenes from that story. And so that too is available, posted on YouTube, because I believe in the power of sharing our history.
Thank you. That is just amazing. And we will go ahead and share that in the chat for everybody to watch. So my, the more I have, got into learning the history of Hibernian Hall and the community around it, it's like, kind of like I was telling Kelley earlier, it's almost as if we're just beginning to scratch the surface of all the stories and all the just memories and just pretty much all the fun and not so fun probably times. that people can share. How did Roxbury become a cultural district? I'd like to hear from each one of you and your own experiences.
How much time do you have?
Let's see.
I'll try to give you the short version.
Okay, I'll take it.
It was many decades in the making. And actually, I have to give props to people like Barry Gaither of the National Museum of African American Artists, and former Representative Byron Rushing, and others who envisioned a Roxbury Cultural District decades ago. Mm-hmm. And we'll get back to them in a minute. But there was a partnership between Madison Park, the American City Coalition, and Haley House. They really wanted to get the designation. So there was funding from the Boston Foundation and some of those partners. And I was hired to basically engage in the designation process with the Mass Cultural Council. For those who are unaware, there are about 50 cultural districts across the state of Massachusetts. There are a few of them in Boston. There's a Latin district, I think, in Jamaica Plain. There used to be a literary district over near Emerson College. I think there's one in Cambridge. So Roxbury went after the designation by checking in with artists. We had a series of conversations with Roxbury artists. We did surveys. We wanted to get their input. You know, what would being in a cultural district mean for you in terms of spaces to live and to create, you know, to do your work. And so we got input from them. We did tours, which kind of got to be a little dicey, but we won't go there. But we did some tours with not only the Mass Cultural Council, and the partners, but also with Boston city arts officials, because the city of Boston also has to sign off on the designation. And then, of course, the grand climax was a city council hearing in Hibernian Hall. And Dylan Buston, who you know was the creative director, he helped us put together like a club Roxbury Cultural District. You know, we had the lighting, you know, we had the spotlight. It was just, there'll never be another city council hearing like the one we had at Hibernian Hall. So the city councilors showed up. There was testimony, you know, somewhere there's a videotape. You know, we were talking about a documentary earlier on, but there is a videotape. And then shortly afterwards, you know, there's an application and there's paperwork and everything. Shortly afterwards, the Mass Cultural Council had their own hearing in New Bedford. And we went up to New Bedford and they signed off on it. And then the city of Boston, they signed off on it. And that was in 2017. And so, you know, we've been in formation. We formed a nonprofit. Actually, Kay Matthew, who you know from Madison Park, serves with me on the board. This is an occupational hazard, Harris, of being a consultant. You know, sometimes, you know, your client partners kind of hook you in. So I became a volunteer. Yeah. You know, vice president of the board. Daniel Callahan, a young man who teaches at Emerson, an artist in his own right, like you and Valerie. He's a filmmaker. He's the president. And we're getting ready to activate Nubian Square after a year, you know, without a lot of public performances safely. We're doing something called Nubian Nights with Jazz Urbane, which some of the people in the audience may be aware of. So there'll be jazz artists. They're going to be performing inside the bowling building, and the music and visuals will be projected so that people won't be coming into the bowling building. They'll be able to hear the music and kind of see the projection from the sidewalk. And so because of COVID and, crowd control and physical distancing and all that. So there will be music. It will, the dates are roughly March 26th through April 11th. So, stay tuned for Nubian Nights. But I mean, really the purpose of the district is to use the arts and culture, of which there is plenty in Nubian Square and also in John Eliot Square, because that's really the district. It's not only Nubian Square, but it's also up the hill where there's a lot of history as well. Roxbury, the State Heritage Park and the Thomas Dillaway House and the church and Norfolk House, they're all part of the district. How do you use the arts as a platform to drive the economic development of the area and support the businesses? So you come to Hibernian Hall, you see a play, you go to the Suya joint, you have dinner at Soleil, you might have coffee at the Haley House, you might buy books at the Frugal Bookstore. So really using arts and culture as kind of an economic driver. That's the notion behind the district.
Yeah, I completely agree. What do you think, Valerie, as seeing it from a different perspective of an artist? Why do you think Roxbury became a cultural district?
Well, I believe, as Kelley has said, that it's been in the works for decades. And you can even go back to centuries when Hibernian Hall first started. I recall my parents talking to me about the dance halls and all the different things that used to be in Dudley Square for them to attend for entertainment. I mean, I remember Dudley Square being what we would call, used to be downtown Boston. We very rarely had to go downtown for anything. I mean, all our stores and everything were here. My role in being involved with it culturally is that I believe that it's always been an integral part of the Roxbury community. And also people are just discovering it now, but I've been a community activist. I've been on the committee with the Dudley Square Main Streets back in the 80s when they were funding residents and looking for a different input for cultural things and what we wanted to see in Roxbury, along with the Dudley Branch Library and attending events there that was also cultural arts and entertainment, as well as Roxbury Action Program with Lloyd King and all these different individuals. I remember talking with Sarah Ann Shaw. She's the one who got me involved with being on the committee with the Dudley Square Branch Library and actually, just being active in my community. So that was the beginning of my role with the arts, and it goes back quite a while. And doing things at the First Church of Roxbury, I've taken advantage of the Roxbury State Heritage Park and for myself, as well as taking my family through there so they can understand, my grandchildren and great nieces and stuff, so they can understand the connection and the great history that we have in Roxbury. That's one of the best kept secrets that people are starting to discover, the amazing things that happen here in our community.
Yeah. And I was going to ask, because, having the privilege to hear all these amazing stories from you, how does one learn more about the space? Would you suggest that, they, go around the community, talk to people, or how do young people or people who have not been as involved in the community or the arts find out more? Because these stories, they are just awesome and they should be shared.
I know that, in the past, Roxbury Action Program, probably like other programs, have done audio history of our community. I think that sharing these stories and all the great things that Madison Park and Hibernian Hall are doing and the interaction that they have with young people and people of all ages and cultural backgrounds, I think just continuing to put that information out, rather we're doing it virtually and in person. So if you're a young person, I think that as the advisory committee, I would like to see us get more young people involved and on the committee itself. I know that's one of the goals that we have talked about as a committee. And so the community outreach and just putting the word out there, I think that all the work that Kelley Chunn has done in Madison Park and Oler and Kay and all the different people that are involved with the board and you, Harris, now. And I think that we just continue to spread the word, because really word of mouth is the best advertisement that we could have. Very true.
And the library, whensoever it opens, but it's online. You know, the library, the newly restored Dudley Library and the Boston Public Library. There's a lot of history there, and the Dillaway Thomas House. You know, when they open, and in the past, they've done a lot of exhibits on Roxbury and culture and so forth.
Okay, so everybody take notes, because I am learning more.
And just to add to the education of Roxbury, is when Byron Rushing used to do those tours that I think you mentioned, Kelley, it was good. You could do the walking tour, you could do the trolley tour. And then the connection that Roxbury Action Program used to do is we would connect with Harlem Book Fair. And so Roxbury Harlem Book Fair, we would actually take the bus and meet up at John Elliott Square and go to Harlem and spend the day there and networking with all the vendors and all of that. So that history continues, and not to forget the role that Elma Lewis had played in making sure that we knew our history and that you reach audiences of all ages.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Valerie, because I live up in Highland Park, and I remember looking out my window one day and I saw the trolley going up the hill, and I thought I was dreaming. It's like a trolley is going through, going up Fort Ave. I couldn't believe it, but it's true. And there's a young man, when you talk about the younger generation, his name is Colin Knight, and he does walking tours all over the city, including in Nubian Square and John Elliott Square. So you can Google Colin Knight. I can't remember. He does it, throughout a lot of the neighborhoods. KNIGHT.
KNIGHT. Okay.
Right.
And I know that there's so much that up until probably the beginning of COVID, there's just events and shows and just a lot of history happening at Hibernian Hall, and things had to slow down because of the pandemic that we're in right now. And I will ask probably the obvious question: how do you think COVID impacted Hibernian Hall? And do you think that we can bounce back from that?
Well, I mean, I think, Valerie mentioned being on the advisory committee and the Friends of Hibernian Hall. And I think they've done a great job of pivoting to, the virtual world that we're all in with Zoom. There've been performances and interviews. We should be asking you that question, Harris.
How has COVID impacted Hibernian Hall? I have to say, I have had a chance to interact with quite a few theaters in the area, and Hibernian Hall has been the most consistent one with its virtual events. I mean, there's always something going on. There's never been a moment of just like, oh, okay, what are we doing now? Other theaters unfortunately have had to slow down or have had to stop for a while for whatever reasons. But again, for the same or opposite reasons, Hibernian Hall kept going because there's events happening all the time that are, I always hear and see something on behalf of Hibernian Hall, which I think is amazing. So everybody has done a great job keeping, so to say, like the lights on at the theater.
Exactly.
Yeah, and there's still so much planned. I mean, for March and April and May, if we look at the calendar of events that are coming up for, the Hibernian Hall, our annual event that's coming up at the end of the month, as well as Mary McCullough's event that's coming up, and you add this circle series webinars, creative circle series webinars, where we get to learn. I'm really excited about that because we meet as an advisory committee, but we don't know all the wonderful and amazing things that the committee is doing. And so by having this spotlight on the Creative Circle series, it allows me to get to know the advisory committee members on a different level in terms of what their gifts are and how they're giving back and how we can unite together. And I think that's one of the things that, living off the energy of each other and being empowered and giving back to our communities and the arts and cultural environment as one of the benefits that are being a advisory committee member. And I look at the list when the emails go out, the list of people that are on the board of directors and all the people that are involved. It's just, I feel really great to be a part of it all.
And there's so much consistency too. Mm-hmm. People meet, people brainstorm, they believe in each other, they trust each other. And partially it could be the fact that, there's so much history and everybody comes together. And also there's a lot of curiosity. So those who don't know, they want to learn. Mm-hmm. And I know, Kelley, you mentioned that I think you mentioned there's over 50 cultural districts.
Yeah, Kay had put something in the chat that Roxbury was the third cultural district, received the third designation as a cultural district in Boston, and there may be 4 or 5 more now in the city of Boston, but around the state, they're about 50.
And do you think, oh, sorry, I'm so sorry, please keep going.
I'm just trying to go through the chat, discover, somebody, Fulani mentioned, hi Fulani, mentioned Discover Roxbury, and we have to give Discover Roxbury their props. Mm-hmm. They were lifting up they were lifting up Roxbury from a long way back. I think Derek Lumpkins was running Discover Roxbury at one point, and I remember him doing the trolley tours that Valerie referenced, but also lifting up artists as well, community-based artists, and through Roxbury Studios, and those kinds of arts and cultural activities. So props to them.
And Candelaria Silva.
Yes.
I was very, very active with the arts and stuff like that.
She started the Roxbury International Film Festival out of Hibernian Hall. I remember working with her on the first couple of years. Uh-huh. And it was just a startup, and look at it now.
I know.
Yeah, she also worked on books with young people. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She actually has a book published now.
Yes.
Yeah.
For children's book.
Yeah.
And do you think that there are more communities out there that are in need of a cultural district? And do you think that it's possible for something equivalent to Hibernian Hall and that culture to be created in other communities that don't have such?
Well, there has to be a commitment to arts and culture. First off, I mean, I think it's kind of organic. Mm-hmm. We in Roxbury and some of the other communities, we had a lot of rich material. We had a community of artists who were invested in the process, and we could not have gotten the designation without their support. So there really has to be a base of support for you to move forward. And you also have to have some kind of a vision for what you want the cultural district to be. Mm-hmm. How do you get support from the community, from artists, from residents, from the business sector, from the city. It's more than a notion, Harris.
Right. It sounds like it. It definitely sounds like it. It sounds that it needs a lot of persistence and passion and energy, and because I know we talk about it now, and we just have all these great memories, but I'm sure there were a lot of even bureaucracy or little steps that had to be overcome to make Roxbury what it is now and Hibernian Hall what it is now.
Well, one of the things we were talking about earlier is that Nubian Square in particular is at an inflection point. There are a lot of parcels that are up for either they're in the proposal, the RFP stage, or they're actually moving forward to being constructed, and some of them have an arts element.
Mhm.
So that we've been talking a lot about the history, but some of these proposals will take the Roxbury Cultural District to the next level.
Mhm.
We haven't mentioned Black Market, for example. I think there's a vision for Black Market to expand its horizons. Right now, it's a platform for artisans and for people who are creative in the community, but there's a larger vision there as well. So I think we're really just at the beginning. You may remember over the summer, during the kind of the start of the racial reckoning, Black Market spearheaded the painting of Black Lives Matter on Washington Street, and also painted the red, black, and green flag on Washington Street. So it's a continuum.
Yeah, very interesting. And for those of you who might not know, so Black Market, can you just tell us just a little bit about it and how it started?
Well, it's actually the vision of Kai Grant,
Okay.
who also serves on the board of the Roxbury Cultural District. It's her entrepreneurial vision to support arts and culture in Roxbury. And as part of that, she has, as I said, she has supported a lot of arts and crafts people who actually sell their work out of the Black Market, which is a storefront in a building across from the Haley House.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can find, if you Google Black Market, you'll find a lot of information, as well as when they have their Black Market hours. But as I said, I mean, I think Kai, who she could certainly speak for herself, she has a much larger vision for what Black Market can be. And I guess I could mention this because it's been in the paper.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's word that Black Market wants to buy the building. They're trying to buy the building that they're in on Washington Street. So when I say there's a larger vision, that's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that just came to mind, Kelley, as you were speaking about Black Market, was one of the other main integral parts of Roxbury arts and culture and promoting our history was when we used to have Nubian Notion right here in Kelley Square. I mean, they were, they were very instrumental. The entire family was a family-owned business, and they made sure that it was well known. I mean, I remember people coming when they came from out of state. The first thing they wanted to know was like, where's Nubian Ocean? I mean, and so they were here when no one else was. Exactly. And so, so I just wanted to give a shout out to Nubian Ocean as well and their staff. I miss them. I'm sure many people do.
Yes, I don't think there'd be a frugal books if there hadn't been a Nubian Notion. And I'd say there's a continuum. Yes. That's part of the part of the continuum. That's a very strong part of Roxbury history, Nubian Notion.
Uh-huh. It's interesting because I was going to ask if there's anybody, throughout the years who has contributed and maybe just kind of fell off the cracks or was left out. But you ladies have mentioned so many amazing people. And does there somebody else that, comes to mind that, we should give credit for all the work they've done? But it seems that everybody has just contributed in their own way, and you have been there to see all that, and I'm sure there's like a lot more. But if there's anybody that you can think of,
I mean, if you go to the Roxbury Cultural District website, you can Google Roxbury Cultural District. We mapped out a lot of the arts and cultural assets as part of the designation process. And part of the community conversation was they didn't just want it to be concentrated in Nubian Square and in John Eliot Square, although in order to meet the criteria for the designation, we had to say, okay, well, this is the geographic area. But, when you go up, to Valerie's point about history, when you go up Warren Warren Street, you know, there's 12th Baptist where Reverend Martin Luther King started his preaching career with Reverend Haynes. I mean, you have the Haynes family of Roy Haynes, the drummer, and then you keep going and you take a right onto Dale Street, and you have the newly designated home where Malcolm X lived with his sister. That's been designated as a National Historic Site. You know, his nephew, or I think his great nephew, is very much involved with the preservation of that space. And you know, you keep going. If you went up Humboldt Ave, you would see the place where Valerie noted, where the Nubian Notion barbershop used to be. And somebody Coach Len Renee is reminding me to go back to Warren Street with WILD radio. How could
WILD, I know.
Going off at sundown used to make me so mad. And then, you know, the National Museum of African American Artists, Valerie made reference to Alma Lewis. You know, that there would be no National Center of African American Artists, the museum with the beautiful head by the artist John Wilson. I mean, so even though we were focusing on Hibernian Hall and Nubian Square, there's a lot of arts and culture and history in Roxbury that is oftentimes overlooked. And that's one of the other reasons for the Roxbury Cultural District is trying to change the narrative of our community. You know, we have a lot of problems. I acknowledge that. But, you know, there's a lot of talk about beautiful resistance and radical joy now. You know, and so we have also been the beneficiaries of a lot of rich arts and culture and history.
Wow. Thank you so much, Valerie.
I'm just going to add one last past memory that supported arts and culture for people, for all people. And that was when we used to do the Playhouse in the Park at Franklin Park. So that's just huge. And I'm not going to bring another past one up.
Well, let's see. So we have some audience questions. MPDC Community Action is asking, do you consider having an event in our great community gardens that are located in Nubian Square? These gardens are affiliated with Hibernian Hall.
Which community gardens?
MPDC, would you like to clarify?
Madison Park Community Gardens?
Hope Garden.
Hope Garden. Ola's helping us out.
Hope Garden.
Is that the one near Madison Park, the school over here? Is
Ola?
That the...
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, if COVID, calms down, that could be a possibility. It's near the Kay says Hope is next to the O'Brien School.
The O'Brien School.
Yeah. So there's a whole, So I mean, there's a lot we can do. We talked about the Roxbury Heritage Site, and which overlooks the city of Boston. I mean, that's been landscaped, and there's, Valerie writes and is a performer and everything. I mean, that would be a beautiful venue. I just so sick of COVID,
Yeah, they did an agricultural fair up there at the State Heritage Park. I believe it was year before last, and to your point of gardening and all that, and farming and sharing information with young people about the different how to eat healthier foods and where these farms and things and gardens are taking place. It was such an amazing experience as well. So, yeah.
And these are venues for jazz events. For plays. So there are a lot of venues in the community in addition to Hibernian Hall where, arts and culture can take center stage.
Sister Fulani is asking, what are the updates for the African American Museum next to the Black Market?
Ooh. That's a question for the developer. I'm not quite sure what's going on with that. I know there've been some events in the Blair lot, which is adjacent to the museum. That property is now owned by Richard Taylor, a developer of some note locally, and he has been collaborating with Kai Grant, who owns the Black Market. And so maybe when we do our follow-up program, we can update you on that. I'm not quite sure.
And I don't see.
But there's a lot of history in that space, as Fulani knows. I mean, you would go by there and there would be, African masks and statues, and from time to time the former owner would have events in there. So it was a real, showcase for African art.
Yeah. Mrs. Fulani says thank you, and that's all the questions we have for now. And I guess since we have a few more minutes, I'm a little curious to know a little bit more, about you, and maybe a few lessons or something that you like to share with us from your past experiences at Hibernian Hall that maybe we should hear, or we should learn from.
Well, I have a question for Valerie that may be kind of tangential to our conversation, but I'd like to know what your writing process is and how you get inspired.
Okay, so my writing process began in 2017, and I was actually, as a young person, I've always kept, writing in journals and different things like that. But my very first book, Love Lives On, was as a result of personal life's journeys and loss of loved ones. And one day I was I lost like 5 family members in a fire back in the 70s. And the thing is that I wanted to know, I saw my mother differently after that experience. I've always saw her as mom, but I saw her incredible strength. And so I wanted to know how she survived that tragedy and was able to give back to her remaining children that were alive. And so then it put me on a journey. Well, what about me? And so what did I go through? And so believe it or not, that's when I started my writing process. I look back through my notes and things like that. So my process is, that was my first memoir. And then I told the story about my family and how we survived that, and the power of love and faith and all those things that go with that, and how it took a community to help us to heal. And what I found was so challenging is how that was a taboo subject for many people. They didn't want to talk about death and the loss of loved ones. And I wanted to provide some kind of healing process for people. And so as I went through it and told my story, that part of that writing process was sharing my story with the world. And I never intended for my story to be turned into a book until I was actually talking to my mother and my aunts. And they said to me, you need to, I typed it out and things like that. And they said, you need to put that in a book. And so that put me on that journey to writing about my family history, my personal journey. And then the second book that I wrote was the unfinished book. And that came as a result of audio tapes and recording conversations that I had with my mom, who was born in the 30s, grew up in the South, migrated to the North. And I wanted to know what her experience was. And my last book that I wrote is Our Love Story. And that's based on 45 years of marriage with my husband, and the ins and outs, the good, the bad, and the things that helped us to survive. And so those 3 books are personal journeys. They're easy reads. And so that's how I got started on that process, was really wanting to share my story with other people.
Valerie, sorry.
No, go ahead, Harris.
You just, you managed to share such personal moments and stories with your audience, with your readers. How do you find the balance between just having, showing that that more intimate side of you, but also having like a more private side to you?
Well, I think it's important that when you write about things that you're honest and you show the vulnerability of yourself and you let people know that, life happens and that you have to just keep getting up from that. I mean, we could have been knocked down and never got up again. Well, I think so. It's important to let people know and encourage people that no matter what happens to you in life, that with faith and stuff, that you can definitely get up. But it definitely takes a community of people to help you do that. And then when you're in that, you may not be able to talk about it when you're going through it, but when you come through the other side of it, rather than be bitter, make sure you're positive about it and look at it as a lesson that you can share with other people. And that's what I found happened to me and continues to happen. So I love speaking my truths and being vulnerable, because that's what people want to see. They don't want to see me, in my success phase of my life, and that's all there is, and that nothing never happened. They want to know that through it all, I survived it. And in every book, I also offer practical tips. I'm no expert on these subjects, but this is my experience.
Thank you. And we have one last question. Well, if you could, Nikolai Alexander is asking, if you could, what events that no longer take place at Hibernian Hall would you bring back?
Oh,
that's a good one.
I don't know if Valerie has ever read, well, I know you've performed at Hibernian Hall, but I would like to see you perform again or do a reading, Valerie. Once the pandemic is over and we can come together as community. And for me, I would come to that. I'm an aspiring writer. I don't think I'm as focused as Valerie is, but I'm working on it. But that would be, what I would do. I mean, I've seen several plays and some readings at Hibernian Hall. So I miss that. And I look forward to, returning once we can have those kinds of programs again.
And I agree with those types of programs to continue doing the readings and stuff like that. Like I'm super excited about Mary McCullough and what she's doing, and Jackie Parker and their whole Magnificent 8 world premiere. I remember watching that with my mom, and just being a part of that whole thing, whatever 2021, it certainly showed us that we can, survive all these things and still produce quality type arts and cultural events for people of all ages. And I think that is what is so exciting about being a part of Hibernian Hall and Madison Park Development Community.
And Sister Fulani has reminded me that the name of the jazz cafe was Cafe Tatante, where they had live musical performances and where she was featured. So definitely looking forward to those kinds of arts and cultural happenings when when we're back and we're all the way live. And
Fulani will be one of our 3 guests next week, so she will definitely tell us more. With that in mind, tonight was great. I want to thank you both so much. I can speak for myself and say that you gave me a lot of information. Once I started learning about Hibernian Hall, I knew that, I can read and watch stuff about it, but the best way was to talk to the people who have been there. So thank you. Thank you so much for tonight. I want to thank everybody tonight for joining. Thank you, Ola, for helping with putting this together.
Thanks everybody in the audience. It was good to hear your chat comments and your questions.
Thank you, everybody. Stay safe.
It was a pleasure speaking to you. You're an inspiration.
It was great to get to meet you, to talk to you, to hear from you. So I really appreciate your time, and I wish we had